I'm Barbara, 29, female. I live in a quiet suburb of Portland, Oregon, in a modest bungalow I bought with cash 3 years ago. I used to be a librarian, but I retired. Early not because of a pension, but because of a very lucky, very aggressive investment in tech stocks I made in my early 20s that paid off beyond my wildest dreams. Now I spend my days managing my portfolio, gardening, and trying to keep my stress levels low. I never thought doing something nice for my brother would turn into World War Roman III, but apparently, in my family, generosity is only acceptable if it's directed at the right person. Before this story unfolds, I'd love to connect with you. Please let me know in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is in your corner of the world. It's amazing to see how far these stories can travel. To understand why my father screamed at me until the veins in his neck bulged, you have to understand the economy of our family. I don't mean money exactly. I mean the economy of affection, attention, and worth. Growing up, my older brother Michael and I were the practice kids. Our mother passed away when I was 6 and Michael was 8. 2 years later, Dad married Linda. Linda came with a daughter, Tiffany, who was a toddler at the time. From the moment Linda and Tiffany moved in, the dynamic shifted. Michael and I were the reminders of a sad past. Tiffany was the bright, shiny future. Dad, perhaps out of guilt or perhaps just because Linda demanded it, bent over backwards to accommodate them. Michael and I were expected to be self-sufficient. We cooked our own meals, did our own laundry, and walked to school while Tiffany was driven to the front gate. By the time I was 22, I was working as a librarian. It was a quiet job, one that I loved, but it didn't pay much. However, I was living frugally. What my family didn't know was that I had taken a small inheritance from our late maternal grandmother, money Dad couldn't touch, and thrown it into a few high-risk tech startups and crypto assets before the boom. It was a gamble. It shouldn't have worked, but it did. By 26, I had enough money to quit my job if I wanted to. By 28, I did. I told my family I was taking a sabbatical or consulting. I never used the word rich. I drove a 5-year-old Honda. I wore thrift store clothes. I kept my head down. I did this because I knew Gary and Linda. If they knew I had money, the requests would start. They would start small, a car repair, a vacation contribution, and they would grow until I was dry. But the hardest part of keeping the secret was watching Michael. Michael is the best man I know. He's a carpenter, a guy who works with his hands, comes home exhausted, and never complains. He didn't get the lucky investment. He didn't get the grandmother's inheritance because he had to use a share to pay for a medical emergency when he was 19. He was living in a cramped apartment with roommates, driving a truck that was held together by duct tape and prayers, trying to save for a future that kept getting more expensive. I wanted to help him so badly, but I knew if I handed him cash, he'd refuse it out of pride. And if Dad found out, the war would begin. So I waited, I watched, and I documented everything. The conflict started, as it always does, with Tiffany. Tiffany is 23 now. She is ostensibly a student studying fashion marketing. But as far as I can tell, her curriculum involves brunch, buying designer bags, and posting videos on social media. She is charming, pretty, and completely hollow. Last month, the family gathered for a birthday dinner for Dad. We were at a mid-range steakhouse. Michael looked tired. He had come straight from a job site and was still dusting drywall off his jeans. Tiffany, conversely, looked like she had stepped out of a magazine, sporting a new handbag that probably cost more than Michael's truck. Halfway through the appetizers, Linda cleared her throat. The table went silent. It was the announcement, silence. "We have a bit of a situation," Linda said, looking at Dad, then at me. She didn't look at Michael. "Tiffany has accumulated a bit of debt. It's not my fault." Tiffany interjected immediately, her voice pitching up into a whine. The school promised that the tuition included the study abroad program in Milan, but it didn't, and then I had to put the hotel on my card and living expenses. "How much?" Michael asked, taking a sip of water. "It's a mix of student loans and credit cards," Dad said, rubbing his temples. He looked stressed but not angry. He never got angry at Tiffany. "It's about $84,000. Michael choked on his water. I just sat there, cutting my steak. $84,000. Michael coughed. "For what? You didn't even finish the semester." "It's an investment in my brand." Tiffany snapped. "The interest rates are killing her," Linda said, her eyes locking onto me. "We've been helping where we can, but with the market the way it is." Gary's retirement isn't what it used to be. I knew where this was going. They didn't know I was wealthy, but they knew I had savings because I didn't work a 9 to 5 and a more. They assumed I was hoarding a modest pile of cash. We need to clear the slate. Dad said, looking at me, Barbara, you've always been the saver. You're good with money. We were hoping you could loan Tiffany the money. We'll pay you back. Who is we? I asked calmly. The family. Dad said, Tiffany will pay when her career takes off. But right now, the banks are threatening to garnish. I don't have $84,000 lying around for a loan that won't get paid back. I lied. Well, half lied. I had the money. I just didn't have it for her. You have your grandmother's money, Linda said sharply. We know you never spent it. That's my retirement, I said. I'm 29. I have 50 years to fund. Selfish. Tiffany muttered under her breath, stabbing a piece of calamari. It's not selfish to be responsible. Michael said, defending me. Why doesn't she get a job? I can get her a job at the site sweeping up. Pays $20 an hour. Tiffany laughed, actually laughed. I am not sweeping sawdust, Michael. I have a degree to finish. The dinner ended awkwardly, but the seed was planted. They wanted my money, and they felt entitled to it. 2 days after the dinner, I went to visit Michael. He lived in a part of town that was slowly gentrifying, which meant his rent was skyrocketing, but the building was still falling apart. When I walked in, it was freezing. Heaters busted again. I asked, keeping my coat on. Michael smiled ruefully. Landlord says the part is on backorder. It's been 3 weeks. I'm using a space heater, but it trips the breaker if I run the microwave at the same time. I looked around. Michael's apartment was clean, immaculate actually. He took care of what he had, but the linoleum was peeling, the windows were drafty single, pane glass, and there was a persistent smell of dampness. We sat on a second, hand couch drinking cheap coffee. Dad called me. Michael said, looking down at his mug, let me guess. I said, he wants you to chip in for Tiffany. He asked if I could take out a personal loan, Michael said quietly. He said his credit is shot from signing her car. He said if I took a loan for 20 grand, it would get the creditor's offer back for a while. My blood ran cold. Michael. Please tell me you said no. I said I'd think about it. He admitted. He's really stressed, Barb. He said he's having chest pains. He's manipulating you. I said, my voice rising. He has chest pains whenever he needs money. Remember when I wanted to go to library school? He had migraines until I agreed to pay for it all myself. But when Tiffany wanted to go to that private arts camp, he was fit as a fiddle. Michael sighed, leaning back. I know. But he's still Dad, and honestly, I'm just tired of fighting. Maybe if I pay it, they'll leave me alone. They won't. I said firmly. They will bleed you dry. You are freezing in your own apartment, Michael. You drive a death trap. You cannot set yourself on fire to keep Tiffany warm. He looked at me, his eyes full of a deep, exhausting sadness. I just want a place of my own, Barb. That's all I want. A garage where I can work on my own projects. A kitchen where the stove works. I've been saving for 10 years, and every time I get close, something happens. Truck breaks down, rent goes up. Dad needs help. That was the moment, seeing my big brother, who had protected me from bullies and slipped me extra food when Linda put us on diets. Looking so defeated, I knew what I had to do. I spent the next week dodging calls from Dad and Linda. I knew they were ramping up the pressure. I used that time to put my plan into motion. I reached out to a real estate agent I trusted. I told her exactly what I was looking for, a fixer. Upper with good bones, a large garage or workshop space in a safe neighborhood within a specific budget. While I was house hunting, Dad showed up at my doorstep. This was rare. He usually summoned us. He didn't visit. I let him in. He looked around my modest living room with a critical eye. You live like a nun, he commented, sitting on my armchair without asking. I live within my means. I corrected. Tea. I don't want tea. I want to talk about your sister, stepsister. I said from the kitchen. She is family. He boomed. Barbara, you are sitting on that inheritance. I know you are. You have no kids, no husband. What are you saving for? Tiffany has her whole life ahead of her. This debt is an anchor she tied around her own ankle. I said, bringing him a mug of water, Dad, she spent $10,000 on a networking trip to Cabo. I saw the Instagram posts. That wasn't school. She was building connections. Dad argued, his face reddening. You don't understand the modern world. Look, I'm not asking you to give it to her. Just pay off the private loans, the high interest ones. It's about $50 zero. That's it. That's it. I laughed dryly. Dad, that is more than I make in a year at the library. You aren't at the library anymore. You're consulting. You think I'm stupid. I see the way you carry yourself. You aren't worried about rent. You have money. He stood up, looming over me. It was a tactic that used to work when I was 12. It didn't work now. Pay her loans, Barbara. Or don't bother coming to Sunday dinner. I won't have someone at my table who watches their sister drown. Is that an ultimatum? I asked quietly. It's a fact. He spat. Family helps family. If you aren't helping, you aren't family. He stormed out. I stood there for a long time, listening to the silence of my house. He had drawn the line. He thought the threat of exclusion would break me. He didn't realize he had just given me the freedom to do exactly what I wanted. The house was perfect. It was a foreclosure, a 1950s ranch style that smelled like stale cigarettes and cat food, but the foundation was solid rock. It had a detached two-car garage that was bigger than Michael's current apartment. It had a backyard. It needed work. Floors were finished, walls painted, kitchen gutted, but Michael was a carpenter. This wasn't work to him. It was a canvas. I bought it. Cash. The closing took 10 days. I put the deed in a trust, with myself as the trustee, but the beneficiary designation was set up for Michael. I drafted a lease agreement, $1 a month for 99 years, with a clause that ownership transfers fully to him after 1 year of occupancy to avoid gift tax complications immediately. My lawyer advised the structure. I met Michael at the site the day I got the keys. I told him I needed his advice on a consulting project. He pulled up in his truck, looking weary. Who bought this dump? He asked, looking at the overgrown lawn. I did. I said. He looked at me, shocked. You, Barb, this place is a wreck. The roof looks. Actually, the roof isn't bad. But the siding. Come inside, I said. We walked through the empty rooms. I watched his eyes. He wasn't seeing the dirt. He was seeing the potential. He ran his hand over the door frames, solid oak under the paint. He muttered, original fixtures. We went out to the garage. It was huge. Dusty, but huge, man. Michael breathed. I could fit a table saw, a planer, and a spray booth in here. You could run a whole business out of this. I turned to him. I pulled the folder out of my bag. It's not for me, Michael. He looked confused. What? I bought it for you. He froze. What are you talking about? I bought it. Cash, it's yours. Well, legally it's a lease for $1 a month for now, but it's yours. No landlord, no rent hikes. You fix it up how you want. You live here. Barb. He stepped back, his face pale. I can't. That's too much. Dad will kill you. Dad doesn't get a vote. I said fiercely. He wanted me to use my money for family. So I am. I chose the family member who actually deserves it. I chose the one who has worked since he was 16 and never asked for a dime. Michael started to cry, not a polite cry, but a heaving, silent sob. He leaned against his beat-up truck and just shook. I hugged him, and for the first time in years I felt like the big sister, even though he was older. We have to tell them, he said eventually, wiping his face with his sleeve. Oh, I know. I smiled, a cold, sharp smile. We're going to Sunday dinner. We arrived at Dad's house on Sunday at 5:00 p.m. sharp. Dad looked smug when he saw me. He thought I had caved. He thought I was there to write a check for Tiffany. Linda was in the kitchen. Tiffany was on the couch, scrolling on her phone, barely acknowledging us. Glad you came to your senses, Dad said, pouring himself a scotch. I knew you'd do the right thing. I did. I said, sitting down. I absolutely did the right thing. Dinner was served, roast beef, overcooked as usual. The tension was palpable. So, Linda said, trying to sound casual, did you bring the checkbook, Barbara? I brought papers, I said. I reached into my bag and pulled out a copy of the deed and the lease agreement and a photo of the house. I slid them across the table. Dad picked them up. He squinted at the photo. What is this? A house. It's a 3-bedroom ranch on Elm Street. I said, great bones, huge workshop. Tiffany perked up. You bought a house for me? I mean, I'd prefer a condo downtown, but if we renovate it. Dad looked at the papers. He read the name on the lease agreement. His face went from confused to a shade of purple I had never seen before. Michael. He whispered, then he roared. Michael. He slammed his hand on the table. The silverware rattled. What is the meaning of this? Dad screamed. You bought a house for him. Yes. I said calmly, taking a sip of iced tea. Michael needed a place to live. His apartment has no heat. He works hard. He deserves a home. Tiffany is drowning in debt. Linda shrieked, standing up. She is being hunted by creditors, and you buy him a workshop. That money was for her loans. Dad screamed, pointing a shaking finger at me. I told you, the priority is the loans. That money was for the family. Michael is family. I said, my voice hard as steel, he is your son. He has been freezing in a moldy apartment for 3 years while Tiffany went to Cabo. I had a choice, Dad. I could throw my money into a black hole of Tiffany's bad decisions, or I could build a foundation for Michael's future. I chose Michael. It isn't fair. Tiffany wailed, actually crying now, realizing she wasn't getting a cent. I need that money. My life is ruined. Your life isn't ruined. Michael spoke up, his voice surprisingly steady. You just have to get a job, Tiff, like the rest of us. Get out, Dad hissed. He was shaking. If you think you can come into my house and flaunt this? This betrayal. I stood up. The only betrayal happened years ago when you decided one child was a princess and the others were servants. I'm correcting the balance. The house belongs to the family, Linda said, her eyes narrowing. If you bought it, we can sell it. We can use the equity for Tiffany. Actually, you can't. I smiled. The trust is ironclad. Michael has a lifetime lease. He can't sell it, and you can't touch it. It's just a roof over his head. If he moves out, it reverts to me. There is no cash for you to grab. Dad looked like he was going to have a stroke. Get out, both of you. Don't come back until you fix this. There's nothing to fix, Michael said, standing up and grabbing his jacket. For the first time in my life, nothing is broken. That was 6 months ago. The fallout was exactly what you'd expect. Dad and Linda blocked me on everything. Then they unblocked me to send threatening voicemails. Then they blocked me again. Tiffany sent me a long, rambling DM calling me jealous and bitter, explaining that her influence was worth more than a dusty garage. I didn't reply. Michael moved into the house a week after the dinner. We spent every weekend for first 3 months renovating. I learned how to sand floors. He learned that I'm terrible at painting trim but great at demolition. The change in him has been physical. He's gained weight, healthy weight. The dark circles under his eyes are gone. He has a heater that works. He has a kitchen where he cooks real meals, and the garage. It's incredible. He started his own side business making custom furniture. He's already backed up with orders for the next 4 months. He's talking about quitting the construction site next year to go full-time on his own. We hear rumors about the others. Tiffany apparently had to move back home with Dad and Linda because she couldn't make rent. I hear the arguments in that house are legendary. Without Michael and me there to absorb the negativity, they have turned on each other. Dad is miserable because he has to support a 23-year-old refuses to work. Linda is miserable because they can't afford their country club membership anymore. They call Michael sometimes asking for rent since he got a free house. He told them that his rent is $1 a month and he pays it to me. If they want money, they can ask Tiffany to sell her handbags. I sat on Michael's new back porch last night. We were drinking beer, watching the sun go down over his freshly mowed lawn. You know, he said, looking at the yard. I used to think I wasn't worth anything because Dad never invested in me. And now... I asked now. He tapped his beer against mine. Now I know that value isn't about what someone gives you. It's about what you build. I lost a father and a stepmother that day at the dinner table, but I saved my brother. Best $84,000 I ever spent.